Hey folks, I get asked a lot about pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn fishing. And it's been very rewarding for me over the years, and it's one of my favorite times to fish. And all I can say is knowing where the fish are is where you're gonna start catching a lot more fish and what they're doing. And I live a lot off water temperature this time of year. It's about the only time of year that water temperature means so much to me, because when that water temperature hits in that 55-degree range, I'm gonna start hitting those migration routes, the creek channels and the ledges where those fish are gonna start moving into the spawning flats. You can see behind me right here, there's a flat right in there. And we're actually at Apache Lake, so it's a big canyon. So anytime you can find flats like that back there, you know that's gonna be a good area for fish to spawn in. So before they move up into those spawning areas, as the water temperature moves up, they're gonna start hitting these ledges and these creek channels right here to move back into the flats. And this is where you're gonna find some of those big females, some of those big males. Now here's the deal, the males a lot of times will get up in there first and start making nests. So what happens is the big females will even start roaming up in here after the males have made the nest. You'll see a lot of folks actually go up into the spawning areas to fish for those little males a lot of times early in the season, and that's when they look real skittish. They're just making their nest. You get up in there and you spook the fish off. Well, what ends up happening is a lot of the females will still be in these migration routes. And so this is where we start catching a lot of the big females before they actually start moving up and actually start bedding. So when that water temperature hits 55 to 58 degrees, it's a perfect time. And if you pay attention to the water temperature, it's a perfect time to start hitting these early, what I call pre-spawn areas, these ledges and the creek channels. Sometimes we don't have these deep ledges like this going into a back of a flat. Sometimes you'll have an area where it's just flat. At that point, that's when the creek channel is is a very good area for you to fish. And what I mean by that is if you have a flat that looks like this, you're gonna have a little cut maybe that goes in the deeper part of the cut that goes into the flat, the little creek channels. And you'll be able to find those with your graph. And those are the areas you may wanna fish. You know, those 15 to 5 feet of water areas before they go right into the flats. Any place there's a little bit of deeper water where they feel a little bit more comfortable before they actually move up into the flats is a good spot to start when that water temperature's cold. Got him. Oh, nice fish. Nice fish. Oh, he came off. Oh. That was a nice fish. Just before we start heading up into the flats, right on the edge right here, that last bit of this little ledge right here of them moving into the flats is where that fish was located. That's always a good sign because you know they're getting just ready to move up in there. Good healthy fish. That's always a great sign when you see that, because when you get to the end of that and they're getting ready to move up, you know it's getting close, you know. Water temperature's warmed up to that 57 degrees the little farther we've come back in here. So that's always a good sign. It's funny because it was 56 over there, 57 just coming up just a little bit shallower. Out there we were fishing in 25 to 30 feet of waters where the boat was sitting, but we were throwing up on that ledge where they're migrating. And here we're sitting in 20 foot of water, and I'm throwing up into about 10. So they're really starting to move back. Getting ready already. Oh, there's another one. They are really starting to move up in there. Come on, buddy. Come on. Oh. Little male bass right there. You can see that they're eating it too. They're getting ready to move up in there and getting with it. That's just a little buck bass. Right here as we're starting to go into the flats. So they're migrating back there as well, getting ready to move up into the shallows. You know, pre-spawn fishing's a lot of fun, and I want to go over a few of the lures that I like to use this time of year early during the pre-spawn when we're fishing those ledges and creek channels, and there's a bunch of different techniques out there that work well, like the Carolina rig, things like that, but these are pretty much my go-tos that I seem to do really well on, and I've been sticking to them for years. But first and foremost is, of course, the drop shot rig. The drop shot rig works year-round, but man, this time of year it works that much better, you know, and we've been very successful on this rig, and when you're fishing those deeper walls and those channels where you have ledges and you can let this go down the ledge and fall down to the bottom, it just works out really good. And we've caught a lot of fish on it. Now this is the time of year that a lot of times I'll make my drop shot rig a little bit shorter, you know, to catch these fish with. I won't use a long leader, I'll use a shorter leader. So that's something to remember. I like a 1/4 ounce long weight, of course, when I throw this type of rig. And I'm using the #1 rebarb hook. Not a 1/0, but a #1 rebarb hook for that particular rig. And it works out really good. Drop shot's always an awesome bait to go to. Now, some of those bigger fish I've been catching a lot during the pre-spawn, I like to use as a jerk bait. And I'll throw a jerk bait out there on them. And this is the kind of bait that you want to work. It's a suspending bait. I like the suspending jerk baits. You throw it out there, you twitch, twitch, pause, twitch, twitch, pause, and that's all I do out there. I work it kind of slow this time of year. Give those big females a chance to really get up there and rip that bait, and they'll rip it right out of your hand. Bass just eat that thing up during the pre-spawn. You know, when the water temperature is still real cold, you know, in that 55-degree range, and you're hitting those areas, a crankbait is another great tool to catch these fish with. 9 to 12 feet is usually what I like. This is the good all-around bait for me, because when you do get up in a little bit shallower water, it'll bump off the bottom. But coming through this water, a crankbait is a phenomenal bait. Slow rolling this bait. It's not fast retrieve, slow roll. 5.2 to 1 gear ratio reel, 10 to 12 pound test line. And fishing those kind of areas like we're fishing, this bait really gets down there and works well for them. The other thing is the all-around jig. When you have a cold front coming through during the pre-spawn, one of the things I love to go to is the jig. And one of the reasons why is you want it really slow moving down on the bottom. They're not hitting quite as well as they normally would on a good day. And so anytime a cold front comes through during the pre-spawn, the water temperature is still at 55 to 58 degrees. You still get in those migration areas. The reason why you have those creek channels and those ledges is they like that deeper water, and you get that jig there. I like a 1/2 ounce jig or a 3/8 ounce jig for that. And that's what I'll throw right there. I like usually a brown and purple natural colors, okay? So something to always think about. All right, the soft jerk bait is another great tool to catch these pre-spawn fish with. Go down and cover a lot of water with this type of bait. This is still another bait. The soft jerk bait, I'll move it a little bit faster during the spawn when they're actually up and the water's hitting over 60 degrees. But when it's 55 to 58, 59 degrees in that area, I slow my bait down. So I'll throw it out there and I'll twitch, or, you know, just make it look like a dying shad falling over. Give that fish an easy meal. You know, they're moving up, they're starting to get a little bit shallower, they're starting to get in those migration areas. This bait is a great tool to catch fish with. All right, and the other bait that you've seen us catch a couple of fish on that's just a phenomenal bait this time of year, and it's one of my almost exclusive type baits that I love to throw, is that Wacky Cinco. Man, you could not beat the Wacky Cinco. And I use a 5-inch Cinco or a Sticko. Bass Pro makes a Sticko. One of my favorite colors is the Houdini, and anything with a little copper flake in it that kind of resembles the crawdads is awesome. So if you find a bait that's got a little bit of a copper flake into it, you're great. But love this particular rig right here. We've caught some fish on it today. The big fish hit this thing, and it's just an awesome bait. When the wind's blowing, in that pre-spawn, you got a little cloud cover and you got the wind blowing and you got some waves crashing, and you just don't know what to do, because in the spring, usually we get a lot of wind. One of my favorite baits of all time is, of course, the spinner bait. I will use the double willow leaf in clear water, and the reason why I like the double willow leaf is because you get maximum flash with willow leaves. So you'll get the maximum flash with willow leaf. I use a chartreuse trailer to try to resemble somewhat of a bluegill. You know, they're just, you know, that's, for me, it works really good. and it's been very successful for me this time of year. So you're looking for maximum flash. Now, if you're in dirty or dingy water, you're still gonna fish this kind of water. You're gonna fish the creek channels and the bluffs going into the ledges, going into the flats. So if you're in dingy or dirty water, then you may wanna go to a Colorado blade, which gives you a maximum vibration. So these are the few baits that I just love to throw this time of year, and they'll probably be loaded up on my deck when I'm out fishing, you know, early in the season. So definitely make sure you got a hand load of these kind of baits when you get out there. And now you know what my favorite baits are to throw. So generalizing everything, you can have 3 or 4 baits hooked up and probably do pretty well during the pre-spawn. You know, we've gone over the lures that I like to use. Now let's go over the line size and the rods that I like to use for the different techniques that we're gonna be throwing. For the drop shot, real simple for me, 99.9% of the time I'm using a 6-pound fluorocarbon line. I use a 1/4 ounce long weight, okay? And I also use a #1 robo worm. It's actually called a rebarb hook. And that's what I use for this particular rig. I like a 7-foot medium action fast tip rod, and I also like to use a Stratic reel, which works out really good, a spinning reel. It's the 2500 series, and that's basically what I use right there. It's a great outfit, and you'll catch a lot of fish on it for sure. The only thing with a drop shot that you got to remember with that light line is to be sure that you use your drag on your reel. This isn't something you clench your drag down with. You want to make sure that you actually use the drag on your reel. It'll help you bring those big fish to the boat. The next rig I like to throw, of course, is that Wacky Cinco. First of all, you're going to need a Wacky tool with they make little rubber O-rings that you're going to have to put over the Cinco. So that's basically what it'll look like when you get it all done. And remember, when you put the O-ring on the Cinco or the Sticko, you've got a little flat piece on that particular stick bait right there. And we call it the egg sac, basically. And here's the front of the bait, the tail of the bait kind of tapers. So you want to make sure when you put the O-ring on, that you put the O-ring on toward the back, which would be toward the taper end, the back of the egg sac right there, right as the ribs start. And if you do that, it'll help level out the bait a lot better, kind of center it a little bit where it falls real nice and natural like. So remember that. The other thing is I use a 1/0 owner Wacky style hook for this particular rig. And all I do when I have the O-ring on is I bring the hook right up underneath the O-ring just like so. And I always face this part, the hook point part, toward the front end of the bait. And there you have it. I like to throw 12-pound test fluorocarbon with this particular bait because I'm usually catching some real big hogs and I love it. But the one thing I want to tell you is I use a fluorocarbon leader. On the end of that leader, okay, my backing line is the brand new Berkley Nanofill line. And I love it. I use white. Now they make it in green, they make it in white, I use white. And the reason why is because when I throw this bait out there and I'm letting it fall because it is weightless, when I'm letting it fall, my line lays on top of the water. I can see my line. It almost, I can see it instantly if anything hits it. So what's really cool is you be a line watcher with this particular kind of line and you're gonna catch a lot more fish with it. What I like to use for my knot, for the fluorocarbon and the nanofill, to bind those together is either an Albright knot or a Unity Uni knot, something small, and you can find those online as well to learn how to tie those particular knots. But those are the 2 knots that I would use, and I'll tell you what, this is an awesome line to throw for this kind of bait. Anything you're throwing weightless on a spinning outfit, it's made for that. I like a medium action spinning rod, 7.5 foot rod, and a good spinning reel that can handle it, and I'll tell you what, you'll do just fine. And like I said, the main key ingredient to being a good Wacky Cinco fisherman, in my opinion now, with all the technology that's out, is having that nanofill. I can't stress enough getting that nanofill line and then tying the leader on, because you can really see what's going on. In the old days, for me to do that, it was really tough for me to watch the line. And so fluorocarbon is virtually invisible under the water, so it's really hard to see. So that nanofill really helps us a bunch. White nanofill line for your wacky Cincos. Okay, for my spinner baits, what I like to throw is anywhere from a 3/8 ounce to a 1/2 ounce spinner bait. And I like the gold and the silver blade combinations, okay? I also like to put that little grub trailer on the end, and I'll add a little chartreuse to it for a little color, that bluegill tint that I like. This time of year, bluegills mean a lot to me, so I like to throw that bluegill type. Anyways, 14 to 17 pound test line, I use fluorocarbon, and you want something that doesn't have a whole lot of stretch to it. I generally use 17 pound test line on my spinner baits now, and fluorocarbon, because you want to be able to set that big old thick hook into the fish's mouth. If you're using light line, you're going to get a lot of stretch in it. You're just not going to get a good hook set. Okay, a 7.5 foot medium heavy rod is perfect for this bait. That's what I use, a 7.5 foot medium heavy, and then a 5.2 to 1 gear ratio bait cast reel, and you're set to go spinner baiting. All right, when it comes to the jig, okay, that I like to throw, you can throw that jig anywhere from 12 pound fluorocarbon line to 17 pound fluorocarbon line. Now that all depends, the line size that you use, really for me, it depends on the area that I'm fishing. If I'm fishing where there's a lot of wood or you know, cover like that, then I want to throw the heavier line. If you're in open water, like on some of these canyon lakes, you're pretty much in open water, you can go down to 12 pound. But I like a 7.5 foot heavy rod, okay, with a 6.2 to 1 gear ratio bait cast reel for this particular rig. That way you can get those fish, because a lot of times they'll hit and they'll run right for the boat. You got to keep up with them. So that's basically what I like to use. Good all-around line for me is a 17 pound test line as well on the jig. But like I said, if you're in open water, you can downsize it to 12, but I wouldn't suggest going any lower than 12 pound test fluorocarbon line. Okay, when it comes to my soft jerk baits, I like to throw, the lighter the line, the better you can get away with, but you're throwing a big old meat hook on these things because you want a big old 4 or 5/0 hook, okay, on these particular baits. So what I do is with throwing that particular bait, I like a offset shank hook. A lot of guys will throw it with a straight shank, but I like the offset shank. I like it because it gives me a big old bite through that big old piece of plastic when they hit it. So I'm able to catch those fish. You can buy them weighted as well if you want to get the bait down a little bit more. So this particular bait would be rigged weightless. But with this particular bait, I like to throw a spin casting outfit, a spinning outfit, and not a spin cast, but a spinning outfit, and an open face reel. I like to use my 2500 series Stratic reels again, made by Shimano. And then of course, about 10 pound test line is perfect for this. So if you go with 10 pound test, and make sure again, it's fluorocarbon. See, fluorocarbon sinks. That's why we use a lot of the fluorocarbon, plus it's got a lot less stretch than monofilament. So in saying that, you know, this bait, it'll help sink this bait a little bit. This bait can act a lot more natural in the water with that fluorocarbon line, and with a lot less stretch in it, you'll feel those bites a lot better. So I'll use a 7 foot medium action rod with this particular. You can go to a 7.5 if you can find those rods. To go to a 7.5 foot would be good too, but anywhere from 7.5 foot medium action rod would be perfect for this. A spinning reel, the 2500 series Stratic Shimano would be great. So that's what I use for this particular lure. Now when I'm talking about jerk baits the same way, my hard jerk baits. Anytime I'm throwing a hard jerk bait, a lot of times I'm throwing that on 10 pound to 12 pound test line. And depending on the size of the jerk bait, if you're throwing the little small hard jerk baits, then you're gonna probably wanna use a spinning outfit with 10 pound test line. And I'd like to use that on a medium action rod as well, with a fast tip, 7.5 foot, 7 foot rod, and then that Stratic 2500 series is perfect all around reel for that. Now if I'm throwing the bigger jerk baits, the 5-inch jerk baits, the 6-inch jerk baits, then I'll throw those on a bait casting rod. It's gonna be a 7.5 foot medium action rod with a 6.2 to 1 gear ratio reel, and I'm gonna use 10 to 12 pound test fluorocarbon line on those as well. Okay, with the crankbait, I like to use 10 to 12 pound test line on this particular bait. Remember that if you use heavy line with a crankbait, it will not reach its maximum depth that it says. So the lighter the line you can get away with, the better. But in saying that, this isn't the type of crankbait I'm gonna throw 8 pound test line with. I'll throw it with 10-pound, 12-pound test line is a great line to use. Fluorocarbon again for that particular bait. I'm gonna use a 7.5-foot medium action rod with a 5.2 to 1 gear ratio bait cast reel, and you're set to go catch a lot of fish with this bait. We got him. Nice fish right there. Folks, that's a good bed fish right there. He did not like that rage craw in his bed at all. Come on. You know, you catch a fish like this, what you end up doing, just like that. That's when they move up on their beds, you know what I'm saying? So they end up really getting mean. But that's a good size male right there. We'll get him back real quick. Let it go back to its nest. You know, that's the thing. One thing that's real important this time of year, now biologists say that 68 degrees is the optimum degree temperature of when these fish move up and make beds. But here in Arizona, I've been on fishing beds on 58-degree water. So the thing is you just got to get up and look and check it out when they get early in the spring. A lot of it could depend on the moon. You know, you get close to a full moon, the water temperature might be 58 degrees. There's going to be some fish on beds. And so the thing is the one lure that I really love to throw on these beds is called it's a white rage craw. Now there's a lot of times I may take my drop shot, natural, you know, oxblood, red flake worm, throw it in there first. If they go after it, then it's real easy. But there's times when you have to really get the fish to be able to bite the bait. Sometimes you got to coerce him into doing it, and getting him upset and putting this on the bed's the way to go. Bed fishing is something that a lot of people, you know, a lot of the professionals do, and we all have a different way of doing it. I've been very successful at bed fishing, and the one thing I do know about it is you need to make sure that you back way off the fish. If you're on top of the fish, you're gonna have a tough time catching it, because if it sees you, remember that the eyes are on top of the fish's head, basically. They can see up, they look for off spray and everything coming in, diving after water. So if you're actually in too close, you could really spook the fish. That's where, you know, for me, over all the years of fishing I've done, those power poles really come in handy in some of the shallow water, you know, bed fishing, is because I can drop those power poles, we can pull back, see what the fish is doing. I'll kick back and I can pretty much tell whether that fish is gonna bite or not, or whether it's gonna be a time before I can get him to bite. But you have to be back where you could just barely see the fish, and that's why we use white. White baits is something you can see from a distance in that shallow water. And that's what you're looking for, is watch for it maybe to disappear or watch the fish to move. I can barely make out the fish when he's up that close on the bed, you know, up that shallow. I pull that far back, and the farther back that you get, the better off you are. What I like to throw is, I'm throwing 12-pound test. This is one of my favorite pitching baits, because another thing is if you're using a big bait caster and you're overhand casting and you're making all kinds of motion, you can spook the fish as well, and it could take it that much longer to catch it. But what I like to use is a spinning outfit. That way when I go to throw out to the fish, I'm pretty much flipping my bait out. I'm barely making any arm movement whatsoever. And you want to stay where the fish can't see you. So, you know, you don't want to make a whole lot of movement. But I'm using 12-pound test fluorocarbon line for this particular bait. It's called a rage craw. It's a 3-inch rage craw is what I like to use. And I'll throw a 2-aught big wide gap offset shank hook like that, okay, just like so. I put a little glass bead on the front of it. I use a tungsten 3/8 ounce. Sometimes I'll use a 1/2 ounce, but I normally don't go any bigger than 1/2 ounce, because it makes, you know, it depends on how shallow water you're fishing. For all around fishing, 3/8 ounce is my favorite. Tungsten bullet weight. And then of course the bobber stop that I put up on top so the weight doesn't slide way up on the bait or way up on the line. So I'll rig it just like so, And there you have it. I use a medium action 7.5 foot, 7-foot rod, and it works really good to catch these fish. Now the thing is you got to remember, sight fishing is a lot of fun to do, but it is a vulnerable state, and you want to make sure that you put those fish back after you catch them right away. Put them back. And this ain't the time of year you want to go out and catch fish and keep them. It's a lot of fun. This is a fun way to catch fish, but it's not a way that you want to go out and just, you don't want to catch and eat. You want to catch and release this time of year without a doubt. Let them have babies so we can go out and have fun another day. But it's a fun way to catch fish for sure. And like I said, there's a few other baits that I like to throw, but that's one of my mainstays right there, right? So I can see it really well. Okay, the first thing I do when I see a bed is a lot of times if you go over a bed and your trolling motor's going shallow and you see a fish, instead of stopping right there, turning your trolling motor around, making all kinds of commotion, you want to be sure that you just drive right on by the bed. Just drive right on by it. The fish might see you, come around, look, and that's the first thing I do is just go right on by. And I'll go by probably about 20 yards, make my turn back around, and then that's when I know I've spotted where I'm at, and I go back. A lot of times I'll drop my power poles in the water where I'm back off far enough where I can see the fish, barely see the fish, and I want to assess the fish and see if I can catch it and see what its emotions are. And basically every bass is different when you get up there. Some will hit your bait right away that haven't been tampered with. Some bass have been already tampered with other fishermen, and those fish could be a little bit harder to catch. You got to remember that they're not hitting out of a feed strike this time of year. They're hitting out of more of a protective type mode where they want anything that comes in their nest out. Crawdads, lizards, you know, your little swim baits, whatever you're throwing in that nest is pretty much, they want out. And that's something else, is anything in your tackle box will pretty much catch these kind of fish. But the main thing is knowing what the bass is doing and how long will it take you to catch the fish. That's the next thing. I won't spend a lot of time on a fish that's real hard to catch, especially in a tournament. I'll let somebody else in a tournament actually take time to catch those fish while I'm out catching the easier ones for me, unless they're big enough to where I'm thinking, man, this is worth sitting on for a while, because their emotions are totally different. The fish might have to move a certain angle on the bed as you're bringing the bait through to decide he wants to hit it. Another thing is a lot of folks like to throw right on top of the bed. Let me tell you, it's one of the biggest mistakes you can make. A lot of times if you splash the bait right on top of the bed, if you are messing with a half spooky fish, he spooks off, takes a while to start catching that fish. Always throw past the bed and drag the bait in. And you'll also notice that the bass will actually turn, and when it sees it coming up towards the nest, he'll go right outside the nest to look and see what it is, and sometimes whack it before it even comes close to the nest. That makes it for an easy catch. So those little things like that are huge. But you got to remember, your bass bed might be this big around, but the spot that he's really protecting is only about that big around. You know, maybe sometimes even the size of a silver dollar. So you make multiple casts up in that area. If the bass just turns and looks at it coming through the edge of the nest, you know, especially ones that have been caught before, they may just look at it as it's coming by. A lot of times, if you throw up there and you bring it by and they just look at it, then throw up there a few inches more and try to drag it across, and finally you're going to find a sweet spot there that the bass does not want it there, and you're going to get a reaction out of him. Whether he bites it or not, anytime you can get the bass to nose up, to me it's a catchable fish. So that's another thing, is that's when I'll take time to play with them and try to get them coerced into biting my bait. Okay, one other thing about bed fishing is when I pull up to a bed and you have a male and a female and it looks like they're turning and all that stuff, and the males, you know, and the female are turning, I'll a lot of times just leave the bed. I won't even mess with those fish. They're so hard to catch. They got other things on their mind. They're in the middle of what they're doing, and basically they won't even attack anything at that point. You're best off just going to another bed. Remember, there's a lot of other beds you can go to, but when they're in the midst of doing their spawning, I don't even mess with them. I just leave them alone. And so you just move on to the next bed. Now, the difference for me, and people ask me all the time, well, how do you catch the female then? Well, that's not how I catch the female. I catch the female when the female's actually backed off the nest, and you see the male on the nest protecting the nest, and the female is just kind of sitting out there waiting to move up. And a lot of times that's when you can catch the big female fish. But when they're actually on the bed together and and they're intertwining and doing all that stuff, I don't even mess with them. I leave them and I go to the next bed. Got him. I got him. Good smallmouth. Right there, folks. Oh, wacky rigged a worm right there on that dark spot, and there he was. Oh my goodness. Come on, baby. Smallmouth are just, in general, tough fish. Look at that. Beautiful smallmouth bass right there. Nose hooked perfectly. Smallmouth bass tend, getting back in the water, smallmouth bass tend to actually spawn a little bit deeper. And so with that said, a lot of times I like to throw a drop shot in. They just can't stand that drop shot. But the other thing is you know, you'll have your largemouth up real shallow and you'll find these deeper beds out deeper. What you're basically looking for is the big black circle. As far down as you can see, you'll see big dark spots down there. Doesn't mean you'll always see the fish. But a lot of times if you've got a lake that's got smallmouth in it, smallmouth tend to like to spawn a little bit deeper than the largemouth do. And I'll tell you what, you can have a lot of fun with that. We didn't even see the fish. I just threw up to the dark spot and boom, there it was. So, you know, you can catch a lot of smallmouth doing that in lakes that have smallmouth. Drop shotting is one of my favorite techniques for the smallmouth bed. You know, like when I go to Lake Havasu or even here at Apache Lake or Roosevelt, if I see the smallie beds, a lot of times the drop shot's the #1 ticket for me. I don't even have to pull out anything that really we have to try to get them to bite with. Normally they'll hit the bait right away. So one other key thing that's really important about bed fishing and sight fishing, there's two key things that are very huge that you got to remember. #1, a good pair of polarized sunglasses is a must. You know, I like the darker amber colored type lenses. Some guys like the smoke in the daylight because we have cloud cover and things like that, and I don't like changing my glasses all the time. I'll wear my darker amber sunglasses 99.9% of the time, and I can see just fine. I've learned a lot about how to read water and how to see through it. I've done very well with this particular kind of pair of sunglasses. The thing that's real important though that I think a lot of folks don't understand is always make sure you get glass in your glasses. I don't use the plastic lenses anymore. It's glass and you just get better optics with the glass for sure. The other thing that's really important about bed fishing is your boat positioning. So many people don't even give themselves an opportunity to catch the fish, even though they can see it and it's roaming around and it looks skittish. I like, if I can, no matter what, to make sure that I leave some kind of a deep water access route to the fish where it doesn't feel blocked off, and that's huge. The other thing is make sure that when the sun's up that your boat's not positioned to where your shadow is going over the bed all the time when you're fishing the fish. Sometimes that's really hard to do, but you got to try to find a way to put your boat in position where you're not actually putting casting any shadow over the fish whatsoever. In saying that, I like to be sure that when the fish is trying to see me, that it's looking toward the sun, not toward, you know, if it's got its best view when it's looking away from the sun. So I try to position myself to where the fish actually has to look somewhat towards the sun to even try to see me any good, because the sun will help blind, just like you looking into the sun, it's going to blind the fish as well and won't see you as well. But you want to make sure there's that happy medium there where you don't want to be right in the sunlight where you're casting the big shadow over the fish. So that is huge. And I'll tell you, that's where the power poles really come in handy. If you've got a boat and you're out bed fishing, those power poles are worth their weight in gold for this time of year fishing. I can't believe I fished this long without them. And it's so nice to have them because I can put my boat in position, I can wait for the fish to relax, whatever I have to do. And actually, I've been able to catch my fish a lot quicker by having those, because you're not using the trolling motor, you're not hitting your trolling motor all the time. Trolling motor is huge. The other thing I want to say is when you're in shallow water and you're around some skittish type fish early in the spawn, for me, if I can see the bottom, I won't even have my graphs on. After I find out what the water temperature is in the area, things like that, I'll shut my graphs off because the graphs have a tendency to put a ping in the water as well. I just want to try to be as quiet as possible. You don't want to be thumping stuff down in your boat or having your partner opening up his tackle box lid and slamming stuff down. It's very important that you be quiet, be real subtle when you get in there, and you'll be better off trying to get those fish to bite, that's for sure. I want to go through a few of the lures that I like to use when I'm bed fishing, and of course this is one of them right here. It's just a white lizard. You know, a 5 to 7 inch lizard works real good. A 6-inch lizard works really good on those beds. And I'll tell you what, for those deeper beds that you're trying to fish, sometimes that little rage craw is a little bit too small for you to see. You can go to a little bit bigger bait like this and see it a little bit deeper on those beds, and it works really good. They can't stand to have a lizard on their bed, and that works really good. The other thing, of course, I try to get away as natural as I can sometimes. I like to use, this is a Jean LaRue salt craw, but I like the orange, bright orange pinchers because I can really see those in light sandy areas, even some darker type beds where you have dark beds. You can actually see the pinchers really good, and I've done really well with that particular bait as well. The Cinco, a lot of times just weightless. I'll Texas rig that Cinco. I won't, I'll use a big old 4/0, you know, wide gap hook on this particular bait, and I'll throw it Texas style and throw it up in there. The biggest fear that a lot of professional fishermen have is accidentally catching the fish on the side or something like that, because a lot of times they'll swipe at it. So I always try to Texas style my baits and make sure the fish runs off with it. One thing to learn about bed fishing is you might have a fish attacking your bait and you get all excited, but that fish, as long as it's attacking your bait, will probably eat the bait. So you've got time, unlike any other time, to be able to make sure that the fish has actually got the lure in its mouth. So when throwing out there, you know, especially in tournaments, it's so scary because you're on these big fish and they're swiping at it and you're wanting to set the hook. You know, be sure that that fish gets that bait in their mouth. And because, you know, in a tournament, you'll have to throw it back if you catch it on the side. So sometimes you catch them on the side of the jaw or something because they swiped at it, but they didn't quite get the whole thing. So I always try to make sure that they're actually swimming off with it real quick off the bed. Now they will sometimes just hit it and blow it out, but I'm telling you, if they're doing that, you're eventually going to anger them enough to where they're gonna hit it and they're gonna take it out themselves. The other thing is the jig, of course. When I'm on some beds, sometimes with big females, a little bit bigger presentation sometimes is what it takes, and something a little bit more bulkier for them to be a little agitated and a little spooked about something being there, so they'll definitely hit something like that. And there's guys that throw swim baits and stuff like that on the beds too, and that works pretty good. But these are pretty much the baits I use all year long, and I've won a lot of money doing it. So it's, you know, you can definitely catch a lot of fish doing it that way too. But those are the few baits that I like to throw when I'm bed fishing, and I can pretty much exclusively go to these baits along with that rage tail craw and do all the sight fishing I want to do and have fun doing it. And so it's a lot of fun, but guaranteed there's something in your box that'll work.